Welcome to LDI 1.6. In this LDI, we're taking a look at drug testing, or testing a new drug. Okay, so two drugs are to be compared to see if a new one is more effective than the standard treatment. Okay, so the commonly set up hypotheses that are used in this particular case are that the new drug that we're trying to test is just as effective as the standard drug. In other words, what you're really saying is that there is no difference between the new drug and the standard drug in terms of its effectiveness in fighting the disease. Okay, the researcher, of course, or the pharmaceutical company that's produced this drug, wants to state that the new drug is more effective than the standard drug. In other words, this new drug works better than the drug that's currently out on the market for treating this particular disease. So what are the two types of errors that you could make when deciding between these hypotheses? Okay, so let's take a look at it. So a type 1 error would be to reject the null when in fact it was true. So a type 1 error would be to reject that the drug is the same when in fact it is. Okay, so let's talk about that. So rejecting the drug is the same when it is means we would come up here in a type 1 error and we would reject that particular hypothesis. Okay, so if we rejected the null when it was true, we would reject that the drug is no better than the standard drug when in fact that was the truth, and accept in its place that the new drug is more effective than the standard drug. In other words, we would be giving them a different drug that really is no better than the drug we currently have in the market. Okay, all right, so let's go talk about type 2 error. Well, a type 2 error is rejecting the alternate when in fact it was true. So if we rejected the alternate when it was true, we reject that the new drug is more effective than the standard drug when in fact that's the truth of the situation. In this case, we could be withholding treatment from patients that could be better at fighting the disease. Okay, so which error might be considered more severe from an ethical point of view? Now again, there could be multiple answers here. Your answers may vary. You just got to back up how you're coming up with your answers, your viewpoint. Okay, if we give them a drug that's just as effective as the current drug, and it's not any better than it, but it has worse side effects and it costs more money, then a type 1 error could be the more severe of those two possible errors. Okay, if on the other hand we have the situation where we're withholding a medicine that could save somebody's life and not give it to them, well then maybe that from the patient's standpoint would be the worst of the two errors. Okay, but typically what we try to err on, unfortunately it doesn't always happen that way, is we try and err in the favor of making sure that we don't make a type 1 error. Is that we don't give a drug to people that is no better than the current drug that we're using and may have worse side effects or other things to it. Okay, to know the true proportion of patients suffering from the disease that would be cured using the new drug, we would need to administer the new drug to all such patients. However, this is not possible. Why not? Well, there are several possible answers to this. One possible thing is that, for one thing, it probably is not such a good idea, because if you did that, you would not know whether or not necessarily it's any better than the old drug that you've been using. Secondly, from an ethical standpoint, if you don't do trials with it first, if the drug is worse than the current drug you're using, you may end up killing a bunch of people when you didn't mean to do that. Okay. And lastly, one way of thinking about that is that you would have to give it to all patients suffering from this disease. Well, as we'll see, as we'll talk about more and more when we get into chapter 2 and 3, it's not possible typically to give it to all such patients. Okay, it may not be physically possible to actually do that. Okay, so hopefully that makes more sense of this LDI. It's kind of a short one, and if you got any questions, don't be shy about posting comments on the forum or sending an email to Michelle or I.